Howdy y'all, I'm Ice Gold, and today I wanted to talk about some ideas that I had for spellements for the Darkmoor spells. Um, I know that Art 2 spellements haven't been added yet, and it'll probably be a while before they are, but the Darkmoor spells are the first shadow enhanced hits that you get. And, you know, they're pretty important. And I'm on the Myth Wizard today because post-nerf Mystic Colossus is a little underwhelming. In PvE, that is. And the reason for that is because it only does 635 damage. And there's no way to upgrade this. The Pierce beforehand is a cool mechanic, but you know, if the target doesn't have a shield, no point, right? Because Orthus just outclasses it anyway at that point. So, but yeah, let's get started with the fire spell idea that I had. So Fire from Above was recently changed from a direct hit to an overtime. And it got a damage buff for becoming an overtime, but what that leaves Fire with is this awkward in-between position between Darkmoor and Caramel when they get S'more Machine. And in that little in-between period, they don't have a good shadow hit. So, for my proposal for Fire from Above, the PvP path, pictured at the bottom, would just, you know, improve the overtime by a total of 20 damage at the end. Just so it would be in line with the 4th arc spells. Something simple, you know, just might as well. And then for the one shad PvE path, I would change this back to post 2020 summer update Fire from Above. And what this did was it would do 960 to 1080 damage directly without the overtime, and it would add 125% fire trap. And you know, I think that's just fine enough. It was a good direct hit, and it served its purpose. It would basically, this center path would just return FFA to what it once was for PvE only. And then it would get another 20 damage and 5% on the trap at its 3rd tier. So, you know, it's just something simple. Nothing too complicated there. But another idea that I had was to add the pre-summer 2020 update shads. But I would knock off another 5% on the accuracy and throw an extra shad onto the pip cost. And what this would do is it would restore Fire from Above to what it was before the summer 2020 update, where it would do 1100 to 1300 fire damage and then add a 25 fuel. This is extremely powerful, but due to how shads are counted, being 3.6 pips, I figure that with the extra 5% hit to the accuracy, this is what I would consider to be fair for quote-unquote 12.2 pips. Because, I mean, all that damage and the fuel, you know, it's it's a lot, but it would cost a lot, so the benefit and the cost are the same. For the 3rd tier, the high end would not go up. That, I think, would keep the spell from becoming too strong. But the low end would come up from 1100 to 1200, reducing the range from 200 to just 100. And I think making the spell more consistent is a fine enough buff. And it's a little small on my screen, but I think I also added an extra 5% to the trap, or to the fuel rather, and you know, I think that's alright as well. It's 2 shads, all those SPELLEMENTs, extra 5% off the accuracy. I think it's fine. Yes, good old Abominable Weaver. The spell I know and love as an ice main. This would be similar to what I did with Fire from Above, except since it has a damage range instead of a fixed amount, I would have the PvP path simply bring the low end up closer to where the high end is, reducing the range from 120 damage down to 40. This, I think, would be a fine enough buff to the spell. Ice's main thing is defense, so raising the high end would not be in line with what Ice is meant to do. So for the PvP path, just bringing up the low end, I think, would be a fine enough buff for, you know, getting all those SPELLEMENTs and upgrading it. For the PvE path, it would be the same damage, although I would add 10% to the shield with each upgrade. And again, that falls in line with Ice's identity as the shielding school, and I think this would be a fine place to leave it. For the top path, I would simply have the first upgraded tier bring back Old Weaver, where it would do 950 to 1150, and then put the 75 tower shield on the caster. And this, it was obviously broken, but as it was for Fire from Above, having an extra shad and 5% less accuracy would make the spell more balanced. And again, in the second tier, or third, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it, I would bring the low end up another 100 damage just to make it more consistent, and I think that would be fine enough for PvE only. 12.2 pips and 70 accuracy. I think that's fine for a Darkmoor spell, especially because it would be very hard to use Shrike with these. I think it would be a worthy trade-off to have that top path in the game. And, you know, the whole point of SPELLEMENTs is for customizability, so, you know, PvE players could go with the 1 shad path and get the extra defense, or they could take 2 shad path and do more damage and have more defense. And, of course, accept the cost that comes with. Also, another thing is that when you get the Darkmoor spells, you typically don't have your second shad yet. The second shad comes at the end of the solar arc, and usually when I'm just questing my characters, I always end up going to Darkmoor at around the Ruined Alcazar, Crescent Beach, Radiance Reborn, that type of little area. So it's still a ways before I get my second shad, and I think it would be a good thing for players to be able to choose from if they wanted to keep the 1 shad path for use between wherever they hit level 100, could be earlier in Chrysalis, and when they get their second shad at the end of the solar arc, right before the hive. So that's going to wrap up Ice. Now, Glowbug Squall is an interesting one. This was infamous for doing immense amounts of damage back in the day, as well as its enfeeble mechanic, which, you know, obviously that's a little crazy, so... Right. For the PvP path, I would have it... I would add an echo mechanic. Similar to what Hydra does with shields, I would have Glowbug Squall do with charms. And what it would basically just do is it would do its usual, 900 damage to all enemies. So it could be useful in team PvP. It wouldn't do that much damage, especially for 2 shads, but the main thing with it would be echoing charms on all of the opponents. Up to 3 would get turned into 25% universal blades. And I probably should stress, I know the card doesn't say it too clearly, but it would be a maximum of 3 across the entire team that's being targeted, not 3 per person, because you would end up with a maximum of 12 like that, and that's a little busted. So just want to clear that up for the PvP path. For the 1 shad PvE path, I would have it do less damage, 940. I honestly could have tweaked that to go a little higher, but the thing with it would be destroying 3 of the enemy team's charms. And this is what the Shadow version does. It just destroys 3 charms along with doing the damage, as opposed to an Enfeeble, which I think would be fine, especially if it's taking a hit in terms of damage like it is here. I put 950 for the other one. It's real frustrating to go back and increase all that, because I have to do the top and bottom pass too if I want to change that. So let's just say that that'll do, like, I don't know, 980 instead of 950. But it would just do the same at the higher tier. And then, as is the custom of these, for the top path, the 2 shad PvE path, it would do what it used to do, 1,120 damage to all, and then enfeeble everybody on the opposing side's charms. And then the upgrade would do 1180, just guys. And crazy as this would be, I don't think it would be too bad, because again, 12.2 pips, extra 5% taken off the accuracy. I mean, already, you need 40% accuracy to be able to not base fizz this. So that's pretty hefty to get, even with the Malistaire robe as a storm. And so we arrive at Myth and its spell, Mystic Colossus. The base spell, pierce 1 shield and do 635 damage after. For the PvP path, I would just have it do more damage, like, I don't think it's in too bad of a spot. A Myth could create extra pressure with it, especially because, piercing is one of Myth's utilities, which I think is just fine. For the 1 shad PvE path, I would have it do 700 damage at the maximum tier, just so it could have the utility as well as being on par with Orthrus. Which I think is fine, like, both of them doing 700 damage. Mystic would finally get some use as a shad, because it would do the same damage, and it would have the Pierce coming beforehand just as contingency if the Myth Wizard ever needed it. For the top path, again, pretty strong, but it would return Mystic to what it used to do. 880 damage to all, and then shatter afterward all the shields on the opposing side. The shatter is like, it's arguably redundant because, the whole reason for adding the Pierce first in the updated version was to make the utility more useful, but having the damage, I think, is what Myth Wizards valued much, much more than just the shatter back before the nerfs. So, even though it would be kind of redundant as utility, Myth would have a shad hit that does much more than Orthrus, which I think all Myth Wizards would want, especially because Orthrus, as it stands, is still Myth's most powerful AoE, since Tatzel just doesn't do that much. And then the third path, or the third tier for Mystic would just do 920 damage, just a basic little 40% increase. Nothing new there. And then on top of taking the 5% accuracy hit, I think this would be a fine and healthy addition to the game. Myth Wizards that want to hit harder and have more base damage on a spell, they would have to wait for the second shad, but in the end, it would be worth it for them to get. For life, Hungry Caterpillar in its current state does 790 to 910 life damage, and then puts a heal over time for 640 on the caster. For the PvP path, again, I would really just increase the damage by not so much. I would just do 790 to 910 goes to 800 to 920, and then for the last upgrade on the path, I would only increase the damage by another 5, but I would add the extra 5 onto the heal. For the one shad PvE path, I would increase the damage by 25 on each upgrade at the cost of 10 on the heal and then 5 on the heal. So the net gain would be pretty nice. It would be doing more damage at the cost of a tiny amount of the heal, but the heal would still be very good and an integral part to the spell, which I think is fine. As for the top path, the 2-shad PvE path, Hungry Caterpillar used to do 950 to 1150 life damage and then put an 800 absorb on the caster. And this would be a good top path for this spell. It would do tons and tons of damage. It wouldn't heal, but it would give a nice little absorb, which is another one of life's tools. And overall, just good damage on a life hitting spell. I think they desperately need that. And especially for 5 pips and 2 shads, because I didn't want to make these spells cost more regular pips, because I think it's important that each school has a good 5 pip shad as well as their 4th arc shad that would cost more, but for 1 less shad. So it would make the whole issue with one of the shadow enhanced hits being redundant after you get the other, that type of thing. It would do away with that, and both would be viable. If you wanted to use Grenadier, for example, you could do that, the 7-pip version, and then if you wanted to use Hungry Caterpillar, you could do that too. You could use the 5 pips and 2 shads version. And then, as always, for the last upgrade on that path, the low end would come up by 100 and make the spell just more consistent. For death, Call of Khrulhu has always been a staple in their arsenal of spells, but after the nerfs, it's become much, much weaker, and I think that the SPELLEMENT paths could improve that. For the PvP path, one thing that's been floated around recently is the idea of nerfing the drain aspect of drain spells. And, I could talk at length about this, but for the PvP path, it would upgrade the damage by 25 in total after you get the last upgrade, but it would only drain 25%. And this would balance it out for PvP purposes, and I think it would be a good way to add Call of Khrulhu back into play. So, 700 drain, but only 25% of it goes back to health. I think that would make the spell much more balanced, especially since it's an AoE drain. So if somebody were to summon a minion, like the death just gets all their health back in its current state, so nerfing that would be a good idea. As for the one shad PvE path, I would have it just, have a basic damage upgrade. It would do 25 on the first upgrade, and another 15 on the second, but the second path would also add 10% back to the drain, which would be fine for PvE, if you were to ask me. For the top path, the double shad and 5% less accuracy path, I'm thinking bringing old Khrulhu back, but not old Khrulhu back. I know the original Khrulhu did like 1100 damage, which is insane, even for, 2 shads and all that. So I think the old 830 drain and then 50% back to health, I think that would be fine for the first upgrade. And then for the second, 870 seems fine to me as well. Because, death does not have a single hit drain, and then snack attack loses damage because of the utility, where it pushes a weakness, or a jinx technically, back onto the target. So having a higher damage shadow AoE for death would be extremely beneficial, even if the damage isn't really that high. It would still lose out because, it's a drain, but I think it would do fine regardless. So last on our list is Gaze of Fate, balance as Darkmoor spell. This has been notorious for its ability to double hit, and as you can see by my SPELLEMENT paths, I have not taken that ability away from any of them. So for the PvP path, it would be a net gain of 10 damage on the first upgrade, because it would lose 10 on the initial balance hit, but it would add 20 to the off-school hit, which is, the whole reason why people will use Gaze, along with the bubble. But, so the bubble would stay as well, and then for the second upgrade on the PvP path, it would gain another 10 in total, for a total of 20, as it would do, again, 330 balance damage on the first hit, and then 390 on the second. So I think that's a good place to leave it for now. We wouldn't want to do in too much damage, but the double hit plus the bubble util, I think, leaves Gaze of Fate at a good spot with this. For the center PvE path, it would be similar. It would lose 30 on the balance hit, but gain 50 on the off-school. And then it would lose another 20 on the balance, and then gain another 50 on the off-school. So, in total, this is a gain of about 50 damage. I could be doing the math totally wrong, but I guess if I did mess it up, I'll look back in editing. So, nothing to worry about. As for the top path, it would bring back Old Gaze, which did 550 balance damage, and then 550 off school. And then for the second upgrade along that path, I would have it gain another 50 damage. Which, this adds up to 1,150 for a balance spell that also has a bubble attached to it, but as always, 2 shads, 5% less accuracy, horrible with feints. I think it's fine. So that is going to wrap up for balance. So let me know what you think of the spell ideas below. As for where these spell elements would drop, I'm thinking late Chrysalis Part 2 bosses. I'm talking about bosses in Sardonyx, the Khanda Desert, and the Hive, as well as the Shadow Palace. Sort of like how Malistaire works as of right now. Because, these spells aren't technically Arc 3, but I will get into the Arc 3 spell elements in a later video. So, thank you all for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm, and peace out.